Welcome, dear listeners, to another descent into the abyss on Throne of Nightmares. I am your host, the eternal guardian of forgotten terrors, where the veils between the living and the damned grow thin. Tonight, we venture into the humid heart of the American South, to a time when cotton fields stretched like white shrouds under the moon, and the air was thick with the scent of magnolias mingled with despair. The year is 1838, an era of opulent mansions built on broken backs, where the laughter of the elite echoed over the silent screams of the enslaved. Our tale is one of forced to watch, a plantation wife's nightmare. A story unearthed from the crumbling pages of history, where a woman's privileged existence unravels into an eternal vigil of horror. Imagine, if you will, the mist rolling in from the bayous, cloaking the grand columns of a plantation house in ghostly fog. The Spanish moss hangs from ancient oaks like the hair of witches, swaying in a breeze that carries whispers from the past. It is here, in this suffocating beauty, that we meet Eleanor Duval, the young wife of a ruthless cotton baron. Eleanor, with her porcelain skin and silken gowns, believed she had escaped the drudgery of her northern upbringing for a life of southern grace. But grace, my friends, is a fragile illusion in a land stained by blood. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple, the plantation comes alive with shadows. The slaves toil until their hands bleed, their songs a haunting melody that pierces the night. Eleanor, from her veranda, sips mint juleps, oblivious, or so she pretends, to the chains that bind her fortune. But one fateful evening, as thunder rumbles like the growl of an ancient beast, something stirs. A curse, perhaps, woven from the threads of suffering, or a spirit unbound by death. Eleanor will be forced to watch, not with her eyes, but with her soul, the atrocities that built her world. Feel the chill creeping up your spine. That's the hook, dear audience. The promise of a nightmare that doesn't end with dawn. For in this story, the true terror lies not in what is seen, but in what cannot be unseen. The eyes of the oppressed turn upon the oppressor, and in their gaze, there is no mercy. As we delve deeper, you'll feel the weight of history pressing down, the air growing heavier with each breath. What if the ghosts of the past are not content to whisper? What if they demand an audience? Let me paint the scene more vividly. The Duval Plantation, nestled along the Mississippi River in Louisiana, was a sprawling empire of 2,000 acres. Towering white columns supported the grand house, its balconies overlooking fields where cotton bloomed like snow in hell. Inside, crystal chandeliers twinkled, reflecting the flicker of candlelight on polished silver. But outside, in the slave quarters, ramshackle cabins of mud and thatch, the air reeked of sweat and fear. Eleanor arrived there in 1836, a bride of 22, her heart fluttering with romantic notions fed by novels and society balls. Her husband, Marcus Duval, was a man of iron will, his fortune amassed through relentless cruelty. He ruled with a whip in one hand and a Bible in the other, quoting scripture to justify the unimaginable. Yet Eleanor's nightmare begins subtly. A fleeting shadow in the mirror, a child's cry in the empty nursery, a dream where she stands immobile as horrors unfold before her. These are the threads that will weave her undoing. As the story unfolds, we'll explore the dark underbelly of antebellum life, where luxury masks monstrosity and the line between victim and villain blurs in the fog. Pause for a moment, listener. Close your eyes and listen to the wind. Can you hear it? The rustle of leaves like pages turning in a forbidden book, revealing secrets long buried. This is no mere ghost story, it's a reckoning. In 1838, the South was a powder keg, with whispers of rebellion stirring among the enslaved. Nat Turner's uprising in 1831 still haunted the white elite, their fears manifesting in tighter chains and harsher laws. Eleanor, insulated in her ivory tower, thought herself safe. But safety is an illusion when the ground beneath is soaked in sorrow. As we proceed, prepare to immerse yourself in the sensory details, the sticky heat that clings to your skin, the metallic tang of blood in the air, the distant wail of a mother separated from her child. This tale will grip you, pulling you into its depths, where the nightmare becomes your own. Why? Forced to watch. Because sometimes the greatest punishment is not pain, but witness. To see the truth and be powerless to change it. Our journey begins now, with the first threads of the narrative. But remember, once you enter this throne of nightmares, there may be no escape. The past has eyes, and they are fixed upon you. The air in the south during that era was not just humid, it was alive with the buzz of insects, the croak of frogs from the swamps, and the occasional howl of a distant hound. Eleanor would often sit by her window, the lace curtains billowing like ghosts, staring out at the endless rows of cotton. Each ball, soft and white, was picked by hands that bled, fingers pricked by thorns, backs bent under the unrelenting sun. She knew this deep down, but the comfort of her position allowed her to push it aside like a bad dream dismissed at dawn. But dreams have a way of persisting, especially those born from guilt. Eleanor's first inkling came on a night when the moon was full, casting a silvery light over the landscape. She had retired to her chamber, the four-poster bed draped in mosquito netting that resembled a shroud. As sleep claimed her, the vision came. She was in the body of a young slave girl, no more than 10, carrying water from the river. The bucket was heavy, the path muddy, and the overseer's eyes followed her like a predator. A stumble, a spill, and the whip descended. Eleanor felt the sting, the humiliation, the fear that choked like smoke. Waking with a start, she clutched her chest, her heart racing. It was just a dream, she told herself, but the welt on her arm, imagined or real, lingered as a reminder. The next day, she noticed the girl in the fields. Her small frame bent to the task and averted her eyes. But the visions returned, each more vivid than the last, forcing her to confront what she had chosen to ignore. This introduction sets the stage, dear listeners, for a tale that will unfold layer by layer, like peeling back the skin of an onion to reveal the rot within. The plantation was not just a home, it was a microcosm of a society built on exploitation, where every luxury was paid for in human currency. Marcus Duval, with his stern jaw and piercing blue eyes, embodied the patriarchal power of the time. He had inherited the land from his father, expanding it through shrewd deals and ruthless management. Eleanor, his trophy wife, was expected to produce heirs and maintain the facade of civility. But as the nightmares intensify, Eleanor begins to question her role. Is she complicit? Or merely a prisoner in a gilded cage? The curse, if that's what it is, seems to stem from the land itself, soaked in the blood of generations. Legends speak of African spirits brought across the ocean, mingling with Native American lore and European superstitions to create something uniquely malevolent. In the Bayous, voodoo practitioners whispered of low spirits that could possess and punish. As we transition into the main narrative, feel the tension build. The music swells, the shadows lengthen, and the story pulls you deeper. What will Eleanor see next? And can she ever look away? The sun hung low over the Duval plantation on that sweltering August day in 1838, casting long shadows across the cotton fields that seemed to stretch into infinity. Eleanor Duval stepped out onto the wide veranda, her lace fan fluttering like a trapped butterfly against the oppressive heat. The air was thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and the distant hum of workers' chants, songs that masked the clank of chains and the crack of whips. She was 24 now, her once vibrant eyes dulled by 2 years of marriage to Marcus, a man whose affections were as fleeting as the Mississippi's mists. Eleanor had come from Boston, a city of cobblestone streets and abolitionist whispers, but her family's fortunes had waned, and Marcus's proposal promised salvation. The plantation was a world apart, grand halls filled with imported furniture, servants at her beck and call, and balls where ladies twirled in gowns of silk and satin. Yet, beneath the veneer, something rotten festered. Marcus ruled with an iron fist, his overseer, a brutish man named Harlan, enforcing order with sadistic glee. That morning, Eleanor wandered the grounds, her skirts brushing against the dew-kissed grass. She approached the slave quarters, a cluster of dilapidated cabins where families huddled in squalor. The cabins were little more than 4 walls of rough, hewn timber, roofs leaking during rains, floors of packed earth that turned to mud in storms. Inside, entire families, mothers, fathers, children, shared single rooms, sleeping on pallets of straw infested with vermin. The smell was overpowering, a mix of unwashed bodies, cooking fires, and the acrid tang of fear. Eleanor rarely ventured here, preferring the illusion of distance. But today, a curiosity, or perhaps a premonition, drew her closer. Among the enslaved was a woman named Leela, a healer of African descent, rumored to practice ancient rites under the cover of night. Leela was tall and regal, her skin the color of polished ebony, her hair wrapped in a colorful tignon as required by law to distinguish free women of color, though Leela was anything but free. Her eyes, dark and piercing, always seemed to follow Eleanor, as if judging her silence. Leela had been born on a ship crossing the Atlantic, her mother dying in childbirth amid the horrors of the Middle Passage. She carried the knowledge of her ancestors' herbs for healing, charms for protection, and curses for vengeance. As Eleanor passed, she overheard a conversation between Leela and a young girl named Mia, Leela's niece. "The spirits are restless," Leela murmured, her voice like wind through reeds. "They demand justice. The land remembers every drop of blood, every tear shed. One day the watchers will become the watched." The girl nodded, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. Eleanor shivered, though the sun beat down mercilessly, its rays like hot pokers on her skin. She felt a sudden chill, as if a cold hand had brushed her neck. Quickening her pace, she returned to the house where house slaves prepared lunch. The kitchen was a hive of activity, with cooks stirring pots over open fires, the aroma of cornbread and gumbo filling the air, a stark contrast to the deprivation outside. One slave, a boy named Jem, no more than 12, with skinny limbs and a perpetual look of wariness, was setting the table. His hands trembled as he placed the fine china, imported from England, on the lace tablecloth. In his nervousness, he dropped a plate, shattering it on the polished oak floor with a crash that echoed like a gunshot. Marcus, entering the room at that moment, his boots thumping heavily, exploded in rage. "You clumsy fool!" he bellowed, his face reddening, veins bulging in his neck. He grabbed the whip from his belt, a coiled leather serpent that he always carried. Eleanor watched from the doorway, her heart pounding in her chest like a trapped bird. Jem cowered, his small body curling into itself, but there was no escape. The whip cracked, lashing across the boy's back. Jem's cries echoed through the halls, high, pitched and desperate, blood staining his thin shirt in crimson stripes. The other slaves averted their eyes, continuing their tasks with mechanical precision, knowing that intervention would only bring more punishment. "Stop," Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible, lost in the fury. But she didn't move, didn't intervene. Her feet were rooted to the spot, her hands clenched at her sides. That night, as thunder stormed outside, the rain pounding on the tin roof like accusatory fingers, Eleanor dreamed for the first time. She was in the fields, but not as herself. Her hands were calloused, rough from picking cotton, her back aching from hours of stooping. She saw through Jem's eyes, felt the whip sting as if it were her own skin splitting, the humiliation burning deeper than the wounds. The pain was excruciating, a fire that spread through her body, making her gasp for breath. She woke in sweat, soaked sheets, the linen clinging to her like a second skin, her room illuminated by flashes of lightning that cast grotesque shadows on the walls. Dismissing it as a fever dream induced by the heat and her unease, Eleanor tried to forget. But the visions returned, night after night, each more intense. She was forced to watch a mother named Sarah, torn from her infant and sold downriver at auction, her screams echoing as the child was wrenched from her arms, an old man named Elijah, beaten for slowing in the fields, his frail body collapsing under the blows, lovers separated by Marcus's whim, their whispered goodbyes in the dark. Each time, Eleanor was immobilized, a spectator in her own mind, the horrors playing out like a macabre theater before her unblinking eyes. The dreams left her exhausted, her reflection in the mirror showing a woman haunted, with pale skin and shadowed eyes. She began to avoid mirrors, fearing what she might see, not her face, but the faces of those she watched. Days blurred into weeks. Eleanor's health declined. Dark circles ringed her eyes, her appetite vanished, her once plump figure wasting away. Marcus attributed it to female hysteria, a common diagnosis for women who dared to show discontent, and called a doctor from New Orleans. The physician, a portly man with a mustache like a broom, prescribed laudanum, the opium tincture that numbed the senses but clouded the mind. But the drug only intensified the visions, making them sharper, more real. Now, they came even in waking hours, flashes of brutality overlaying reality. While embroidering in the parlor, she would see ghosts in the mirrors, translucent figures with eyes of accusation, their lips moving in silent pleas. During dinner, as Marcus carved the roast, she envisioned the knife as a tool of torture, blood dripping not from meat but from human flesh. Desperate for answers, Eleanor confronted Leela in the slave quarters one moonlit night. The cabins were silent, save for the occasional cough or baby's cry. Leela was sitting by a small fire, grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle, the scent of sage and something bitter filling the air. "What have you done to me?" Eleanor hissed, her voice trembling with fear and anger. Leela looked up, her eyes reflecting the flames like twin infernos. Her smile was enigmatic, revealing teeth filed to points in the tradition of her ancestors. "Nothing but open your eyes, mistress. The plantation's curse is its own making. The blood cries out from the ground, and you must bear witness. You live in luxury built on our pain now. You share it." Eleanor backed away, her mind reeling. Was it voodoo, a spell cast with dolls and pins? Or something deeper, a collective rage manifesting as supernatural retribution? As the narrative deepens, the tension builds. Eleanor begins to piece together Marcus's darker secrets, rumors of rituals in the swamps, where he sought to bind the spirits for prosperity, offering sacrifices of animals, or worse, to ensure bountiful harvests. But the spirits, angered by his arrogance, turned the tables. Eleanor is now their vessel, forced to relive the sufferings she ignored. The fields at dusk took on a sinister hue, fireflies dancing like lost souls among the cotton stalks. Eleanor, wandering alone one evening, heard whispers from the rose, names of the dead, pleas for freedom, curses upon the Duvals. The wind carried them, rustling the leaves like dry bones. She stumbled upon a hidden grave, unmarked, tucked away in a copse of trees, where rebels from years past were buried after a failed escape. Touching the soil, cold and damp, a vision assaulted her as a small uprising in 1831, inspired by Nat Turner, where slaves rose with scythes and axes, only to be cut down by militia. Bodies hung from the oaks, swaying gently, their eyes fixed on her in eternal judgment. Terrified, she confided in her personal maid, Bessie, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes but calloused hands, who had been with the family for decades. Bessie, while brushing Eleanor's hair one night, whispered of old tales. "Miss Leela knows the ways of the low," she said, her voice low. "She can call them, bind them. But once the watching starts, it don't stop till the debt is paid. You gotta make amends, miss, or it'll eat your soul." Eleanor's nightmare was just beginning, the plantation's shadows closing in like a noose. The house, once a symbol of grandeur, now felt like a tomb, its walls echoing with unseen footsteps, its rooms filled with the scent of decay. Marcus noticed her distraction, his temper flaring. "You're my wife," he growled one evening, pinning her against the wall. "Act like it." But Eleanor could see the fear in his eyes too, the fear of losing control of the empire crumbling. As part I draws to a close, the stage is set for escalation. The visions are no longer sporadic, they are a constant companion, a second sight that overlays the world with horror. Eleanor must decide, ignore them and descend into madness, or confront the truth and risk everything. The autumn winds howled through the Duval plantation like the wails of the damned, stripping leaves from the oaks and exposing the gnarled branches that clawed at the sky. The air grew cooler, but the heat of Eleanor's torment only intensified. She paced the creaking floors of the big house, her footsteps echoing in the empty halls, her mind a prison of unrelenting visions. The curse had deepened, no longer content with mere observation. Now, she felt the pain physically. The lashes bite, leaving phantom welts on her skin, the chain's weight chafing her wrists. The soul, crushing despair that made every breath a labor. Marcus, oblivious to her inner turmoil, prepared for the annual harvest ball. A lavish affair that drew planters from miles around to flaunt their wealth and negotiate deals. The house was abuzz with preparations, slaves polishing silver until it gleamed, arranging flowers in crystal vases, baking pies that filled the air with the sweet scent of pecans and cinnamon. "You'll charm them all, my dear," Marcus said, kissing her cold cheek, his lips rough against her skin. But as guests arrived in horse-drawn carriages, their laughter grating like nails on slate, Eleanor saw through the facade. In every powdered face and embroidered vest, she glimpsed the enslaved suffering, a lady's diamonds bought with the proceeds from auctioned families, a gentleman's cigar lit by hands scarred from endless toil, his boots polished by knees bent in submission. That night, during the ball, the visions peaked in a crescendo of horror. The grand ballroom was alive with light from 100 candles, the orchestra playing a waltz that swirled like a vortex. Couples danced, skirts twirling in a kaleidoscope of colors, the air heavy with perfume and cigar smoke. But for Eleanor, the music distorted, the notes soaring into screams. She was transported, her body swaying to the rhythm while her mind inhabited another. First, she was in the body of a field hand named Thomas, a strong man in his 30s with muscles honed by labor but spirit unbroken. She marched under Harlan's watchful eye, the sun beating down, the cotton thorns piercing her fingers. A moment of rest, and the whip cracked. Splitting skin, she felt the warm blood trickle down her back, the agony radiating like fire. Then a shift to Sarah, the mother from earlier visions, giving birth in a filthy cabin. The pain of labor was excruciating, waves of contraction that made her scream. But no midwife came, only Bessie with rags and hot water. The child emerged, slick and crying, but before Sarah could hold him, Harlan burst in, wrenching the infant away. "This one's for sale," he snarled. The screams merged with the orchestra's melody, turning the waltz into a dirge of despair. Eleanor collapsed on the dance floor, her gown pooling around her like blood, gasping, "Make it stop! Please make it stop!" Guests murmured in concern, fans fluttering, attributing it to the heat or too much wine. "Vapors," one lady whispered. Marcus, his face a mask of embarrassment and anger, dragged her upstairs, his grip bruising her arm. "You're embarrassing me in front of our peers," he snarled, shoving her into the bedroom and locking the door. Alone, the ghosts materialized, translucent forms of slaves long dead, their bodies bearing the marks of torture. Whip scars, branded skin, missing limbs. Their eyes were hollow pits pointing accusatory fingers. "Watch," they intoned in a chorus of whispers. "See what you built. See the foundation of your world." The room spun, the wallpaper peeling in her mind to reveal blood-stained walls. Desperation drove Eleanor to escape that night, slipping out a window and into the swamps, where cypress trees loomed like sentinels, their knees protruding from the murky water like bony fingers. Alligators lurked in the shadows, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. Leela held court there, under a canopy of moss, firelight flickering on her face as she stirred a pot of roots and herbs. Mandrake nightshade, bones of small animals, the brew bubbled, releasing a steam that smelled of earth and decay. Other slaves gathered in a circle, their faces solemn, chanting softly in a language that blended African dialects with Creole. Eleanor burst into the clearing, her nightgown torn by branches, feet muddied. "Please," she begged, falling to her knees. "End this. I can't bear it anymore." Leela's eyes met hers, unflinching. "The spirits chose you," she said, her voice resonant, "because you see but do nothing. You dine on food we grow, wear clothes we sew, live in a house we built, yet you turn away from our pain. To break the curse, you must act. Free us, or join us in eternal witness." Eleanor pleaded for a charm, a potion, anything to release her, but Leela's words echoed like thunder. "The nightmare is truth. Embrace it, or it consumes you." Returning home through the fog-shrouded paths, branches scraping her skin like claws, Eleanor confronted Marcus the next day. In his study, surrounded by ledgers of profit stained with invisible blood, she demanded he free the slaves. "This place is cursed," she cried. "The suffering, I see it all." Marcus laughed, a cold, mirthless sound, calling her mad. "You're hysterical," he said, locking her in her room with guards at the door. The visions intensified, invading every moment now, a revolt brewing in secret meetings under the stars. She saw through the rebels' eyes, knives sharpened on stones, plans whispered in hushed tones, dreams of freedom fueling their resolve. On a moonless night it erupted. Slaves rose from their cabins, torches blazing like fallen stars, overtaking the overseers in a surge of pent-up rage. Harlan's screams pierced the air as he was dragged to the fields, his body bound to a stake. The whip turned against him. Marcus, awakened by the commotion, grabbed his rifle, loading it with trembling hands. But the mob breached the house, doors splintering, glass shattering. Eleanor, bound to watch from her locked room, felt every blow, every cry of vengeance as the enslaved exacted retribution. The big house burned, flames licking the columns like hungry tongues, the smoke thick and choking. In the chaos, she saw her own body frozen in terror as spirits forced her to witness the carnage. But the revolt failed. Neighboring planters arrived with militias, quelling the uprising with brutal efficiency. Gunshots rang out. Bodies fell to the ground, the air thick with gunpowder and death. The survivors were rounded up, chained, some hanged on the spot as examples. Eleanor awoke from the vision, the curse unbroken, the nightmare looping eternally in her mind. In the aftermath, the plantation limped on, repairs made by the remaining slaves under tighter guard. But Eleanor's sanity frayed like old rope. She wandered the fields at night, murmuring apologies to ghosts only she could see, her bare feet bleeding on the rough earth. Marcus, fearing scandal that could ruin his reputation, confined her to the attic, where she scratched messages on the walls. Names of the dead, pleas for forgiveness. The story culminates in Eleanor's final act of desperation. One stormy night, as lightning illuminated the sky, she escaped her confinement, gathering lamp oil and matches. Setting fire to the house, starting in the study with its damning ledgers, she hoped to end the cycle, to burn away the curse. As flames consumed everything, the furniture, the portraits, the very foundations, she watched one last time, the spirits surrounding her in a circle, their faces finally at peace, or perhaps mocking her. The heat scorched her skin, the smoke filled her lungs, but in that moment, was it release or eternal damnation? The plantation fell to ashes, but the nightmare, Dear listeners, some say it lingers still. To fully grasp the chilling depths of Eleanor's nightmare, we must delve into the real history of the antebellum South in 1838, a time when slavery was not just an institution, but the economic backbone of the region, fueling vast empires built on human misery. The United States was expanding westward, with cotton as king, driving the economy through exports to Europe. Plantations like the fictional Duval were commonplace along the Mississippi Delta, vast estates of thousands of acres dedicated to cash crops such as cotton, sugar, and rice. These operations relied on the forced labor of enslaved Africans and their descendants who were treated as property, bought and sold at auctions where families were routinely separated. Living conditions for the enslaved were abysmal. Slave quarters consisted of crude cabins, often windowless, with dirt floors and thatched roofs that offered little protection from the elements. Overcrowding was rampant. A single cabin might house 10 or more people, leading to the spread of diseases like cholera and tuberculosis. Nutrition was poor, consisting mainly of cornmeal, salt pork, and whatever could be foraged or grown in small garden plots allowed on Sundays, the only day of rest. Punishment was swift and severe whippings, brandings, and even mutilations for perceived infractions. Overseers like Harlan were hired for their brutality, incentivized by bonuses tied to production quotas. Plantation wives, such as Eleanor, occupied a complex and often contradictory role in this system. As mistresses of the household, they managed domestic affairs, overseeing cooking, cleaning, and child rearing by house slaves, Many came from northern or European backgrounds, bringing with them ideals of domesticity, but they quickly adapted to or ignored the horrors around them. Historical accounts, such as diaries from women like Mary Boykin Chestnut, reveal a mix of guilt, denial, and complicity. Some wives participated in punishments, while others turned a blind eye to maintain their status. In Louisiana, with its French and Spanish influences, the Code Noir governed slavery, but enforcement was lax, allowing for extreme cruelty, especially on sugar plantations, where the labor was so grueling that the average lifespan of an enslaved worker was just 7 years after arrival. The year 1838 was marked by economic pressures. The Panic of 1837 had caused financial instability, leading planters to push their slaves harder to maintain profits. Whispers of abolitionism from the North filtered south, fueling paranoia among the white elite. Slave revolts, though rare due to heavy surveillance, loomed as a constant threat. Nat Turner's rebellion in Virginia in 1831, where over 50 whites were killed before the uprising was crushed, led to stricter laws. Bans on teaching slaves to read increased militias and night patrols. In Louisiana, the German Coast Uprising of 1811, the largest slave revolt in U.S. history, still echoed, with heads of rebels displayed on pikes as warnings. Folklore and legends amplify the eerie atmosphere of our tale. The South is rife with haunted plantation stories, blending fact with supernatural embellishment. The Myrtles Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana, is said to be one of the most haunted houses in America, with ghosts of enslaved people who were poisoned or executed appearing to visitors. Tales of haints, ghosts wandering fields, or plat ice, shape-shifting spirits derived from African-American folklore, serving as metaphors for the unresolved trauma of slavery. Voodoo or vodou, introduced by enslaved West Africans, particularly from Dahomey and Congo, flourished in New Orleans and rural areas. Practitioners like Marie Laveau, the famous voodoo queen active in the 1830s, used herbs, rituals, and charms for healing love and curses. In our story, Leela embodies this tradition, her curses drawing from real practices where dolls, gris, or potions could allegedly afflict enemies with illness or visions. Cultural elements also include spirituals, songs sung in the fields that encoded messages of resistance, like "Wade in the Water," guiding escapees. These blended Christian hymns with African rhythms, providing solace and subversion. The blending of fact and folklore creates a sense of unsettling authenticity. Historical sites like Whitney Plantation preserve slave narratives, revealing stories of curses and hauntings that mirror Eleanor's experience. Archaeological digs uncover conjure bags, buried under cabins, containing bones, coins, and herbs for protection against evil, including the evil of masters. In 1838, the Amistad Mutiny was brewing, occurring in 1839, where enslaved Africans overthrew their captors, highlighting global resistance. Closer to home, free people of color in Louisiana navigated a precarious existence, with laws restricting their movements. This context underscores the powder keg of tension, a society where luxury coexisted with barbarity, and the supernatural seemed a logical extension of earthly horrors. Blending these elements, our narrative gains depth. Eleanor's curse isn't mere fiction, but a symbolic distillation of historical guilt. The swamps, with their alligators and willow, the wisps, ghost lights from marsh gas, were seen as liminal spaces where the veil between worlds thinned, perfect for rituals. Legends of Rougarou, werewolves, or Feu-Follet, the fool's fire, added to the eerie ambience, making the South a breeding ground for nightmares. As we explore this, remember, history isn't dead, it haunts. The echoes of 1838 resonate in modern discussions of reparations and racial justice, making this tale not just chilling, but profoundly relevant. At its core, Forced to Watch, a plantation wife's nightmare, symbolizes the psychological burden of complicity in systemic evil, a theme that resonates through history and into the present. Eleanor's enforced spectatorship mirrors the white gaze on black suffering, a passive observation that perpetuates injustice by refusing to intervene. This connects to universal fears of guilt and retribution, where ignorance is no defense against the moral reckoning that follows. In psychological terms, it's akin to survivor's guilt or vicarious trauma, where empathy becomes a tormentor. Thematically, the story explores cultural trauma, slavery's legacy, as a collective wound that haunts American society. The ghosts represent transgenerational trauma passed down through bloodlines and institutions, much like how descendants of enslaved people today grapple with systemic inequalities rooted in the past. Eleanor's visions force her to confront the banality of evil, a concept from Hannah Arendt, where ordinary people enable atrocities through inaction. Her position as a plantation wife highlights gender dynamics too. Women in the antebellum South were subjugated yet privileged, their agency limited but their silence weaponized. Human nature's dark side is laid bare, the capacity for denial amid evident atrocity. Marcus embodies the rationalizer, using religion and economics to justify cruelty, while Eleanor represents the awakening conscience, tortured by empathy. Symbolically, the curse is a manifestation of the call of the blood, where the land itself, polluted by violence, demands atonement. The swamps symbolize the subconscious, murky and dangerous, where repressed truths surface. Psychologically, Eleanor's descent evokes dissociation and hallucinations, perhaps induced by trauma or even ergot poisoning from tainted food, common in the era. But thematically, it's a metaphor for awakening, seeing the other as self-dissolving boundaries of privilege. This ties to existential fears, the horror of powerlessness, the dread of judgment from beyond the grave. In a broader context, the tale connects to Gothic literature, like Edgar Allan Poe's works set in the South, where decay and madness reflect societal ills. It also echoes slave narratives, such as Frederick Douglass's, where the enslaved's gaze indicts the oppressor. Culturally, it draws from African diasporic beliefs in ancestral spirits demanding justice, blending with Christian notions of hell as eternal witness to sins. Ominously, the story warns of inherited sins, echoing in modern issues like racial reckoning post-Black Lives Matter. If we ignore history, do we invite our own curses? The thematic exploration leaves us pondering, are we all, in some way, forced to watch the world's horrors? And what happens if we look away? Maintaining an intellectual yet ominous tone, this analysis reveals the story's layers, inviting listeners to reflect on their own complicity in contemporary injustices. As the embers of the Duval plantation fade into ash under a dawn sky streaked with blood-red hues, Eleanor's nightmare lingers like smoke in the air, a spectral reminder that some horrors never truly die. Did the fire release her, purifying the curse in its consuming blaze, or did it bind her eternally to the spirits, her soul wandering the scorched earth? The ruin stood as a monument to hubris, overgrown with vines and haunted by whispers that locals avoided after dark. Marcus perished in the flames, his screams merging with those he had inflicted, a poetic justice or mere coincidence. But the true conclusion is not in resolution, but in the lingering question, what if the curse extends beyond the page, beyond the past? In the quiet of your own home, as shadows lengthen and the wind moans, do you feel eyes upon you? The eyes of history, demanding you bear witness to injustices old and new. This tale of 1838 is not confined to its era. It echoes in every unacknowledged wrong, every silenced voice. Dear listeners, carry this story into the night. Let it seep into your dreams. The throne of nightmares awaits your return, with more forgotten terrors to unveil. Until then, sleep, if you can. For in the darkness, you might find yourself forced to watch